Hello everyone and welcome back to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and over the years I've made a lot of videos about minimalism and decluttering. However, over time I think my opinion has changed a bit, or at the very least I have maybe some different, more nuanced or contextual approaches to some of these tips that I had previously shared that I thought was good to clear up. Of course, with these, some of these may be more on the hot take aspect, so I totally understand if you don't agree with any of these different, circumstances. And there are many cases where the original idea stands true still, but I just think it's important to unpack some of these more nuanced layers of minimalism and decluttering because it can be easy, but it also can require a lot more thought and different circumstances for different items and types of clutter, etc. Let's jump right in. In many of my past decluttering idea videos, I talked about the importance of decluttering duplicates. If you've got, multiple of the same thing that serve the same purpose, why do you bother having multiple of them? And overall, I think this has a lot of merit. I know there was a trend maybe a few years back. I didn't ever make a video like this, but people were doing those videos, things I only own one of. And it kind of gets into that same idea. But the truth is we do have many items that we have duplicate items of, and you really could justify probably just having one, but at personal preference, we have multiple. But in terms of items that you're not necessarily using as often or constantly, that we really like having duplicates of, I know scissors, for instance. I think we have a pair of scissors in almost every room of our house. And it's just nice whenever there's something random that you need. I feel like that's an item when we had less, or at least had like one main pair, like in a central area, it was just irritating sometimes because maybe they had been washed in the dishwasher, or maybe one of us hadn't put them back in the right place, and it just became a little more irritating. So we have found a lot of benefit to having multiple pairs of scissors. I know for me, hair scrunchies, inevitably, they just seem to disappear even though they have a home base, and I'm constantly putting them back there. So for me, I think I have like 10 that I rotate in and out, depending on the day. And it's just nice in some cases to have more than those, just one item. Of course, there's something to be said, like if you already have these extra items versus going out to actively buy additional copies of them, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. But in my case, we do believe duplicates have a time and a place. In many videos in the past, I've talked against using organizational tools as basically a band-aid solution to a clutter problem. So I've talked about how I think they can enable clutter. I think that they allow us to maybe organize our clutter, but not actually live clutter-free and get rid of what needs to get rid of. And organizational tools, I still believe, can prevent us from making progress because it provides that safe haven that we don't have to deal with it now, we'll deal with it later mindset. However, I think as I've gotten older and as I'm mentally preparing and starting to do preliminary steps before we move into our house this summer, first time owning a single family home, I definitely am more so understanding the time and place for different organizational tools and how certain of these bins and organizers can be beneficial. I think with anything in life, any sort of tool, you can use it in a variety of ways. And so I think before I was just seeing it as, oh, you have these extra storage bins, they're full of stuff, like problem. But I think now I'm understanding more that, just because you have the organizational tool itself, it's all about how you use it. You could stuff everything possible and fill this plastic tub, let's say, up to the brim with all this random stuff that you just don't want to deal with. Or they could just be nicely separated, labeled, and not filled very much so that you can easily access what you need. And I think one of the pieces of furniture that also helped me understand that there was nothing inherently wrong with organizers was how we set up our office in the condo. We still have these IKEA pieces from there in our current place, and we're not sure what the future holds, where they'll go in our home, but having a piece like this, a big organizational tool, just provided beautiful structure to the room and was really a focal point for our office. Back in the condo, that just wasn't there when we weren't using these, aesthetic and well-organized options. So I definitely think I was too intense on my stance against organizing tools, and definitely think there really is a time and a place for it when they're useful. Something else I think I didn't fully unpack from a previous tip was talking about reusable items. Now, Don't get me wrong, I do love reusable items. I want to reduce our impact environmentally and socially as much as possible. But something I've realized in the time since talking about, reusable items on this channel is that I think it only makes sense to use reusable items when you were already using the disposable version of something and now you want to replace it. Because something that I've noticed in myself, and maybe others can relate, is that there might be temptation to invest in a certain reusable item, but we weren't actually using the disposable item first. Like, we haven't actually put that to the test of if it's something useful to us. And then, unfortunately, the reusable item doesn't get used much because you didn't really need to replace something. You didn't really need that item in the first place. And just to give an example, in the last couple months, something I was thinking about that I did not purchase, and I'm glad I didn't. Some of the business owners that I follow have reusable dry erase monthly calendars, a set of 12 that's up on a wall, and then they can write in what they have going on and keep track of dates. And in theory, I love that. I love the idea of that. It's reusable so you can use it forever. It's beautiful. Having that visual representation, I feel like could be nice. So I did think about it. I thought about buying them for myself. However, I thought, I haven't ever put a whole year's worth of calendars up on a wall before. We just have our dry erase fridge calendars just for 2 months. So I thought, let's just test it before I rush into trying to buy something. And I printed out 12 pieces of paper, each with monthly calendars, and hung them up on the wall just with sticky tack. So a much cheaper and easy option. And guess what? Turns out I don't really have much I have to write on the calendar, to be honest. So I love the idea of it, but I think for many, they have much more to write down. Our business is really flexible. It's like, I work when I want to work, and we decide how much we work. If we work harder, then we do a little better. It's not as much like, at 2 p.m. on this day, this is happening. It's really low key. And for me, if I would have bought the reusable, it would have been a waste. Now, that was quite an extensive story, longer than it needed to be, but it's possible that you have been tempted to buy certain reusable items that you didn't actually have a need for beforehand. Of course, I still swear by our reusable bags at the grocery store and the reusable water bottles we have, but I think it's just good to be mindful prior to purchasing something if it's actually needed. Just because it's reusable doesn't make it sustainable if you're not going to use it. This one I haven't talked about in a long time, but I often talked about the importance of libraries in trying to prevent book spending and also prevent bringing new stuff in that's going to stay in your space. I think libraries are incredible, and I still do. But I think something I didn't understand then, and also I think culture has changed a bit, is the importance of financially supporting especially new authors and maybe some who are getting their books banned, in certain places. At least in the US, there's certain states that really enjoy banning books and censorship and whatnot. So I think I didn't understand the importance of supporting these authors, especially if it's a first book for them or a book that's not going to be released everywhere. I think it's really important to, rather than just wait for the library book, to financially support it. Of course, libraries are still amazing, and I also understand everyone's in a different financial place. And I also know there are certain types of books, if you know you only are going to probably read it once and move on, then, the library is nice because you don't have an item to keep after that. But that's just helped me kind of understand. Now, if it's a book that's already a bestseller, they don't need me to buy it. They're good. That is definitely something I think about now if I'm considering wanting to read a book. Does this author need support? Are they newer? Maybe are they from an underrepresented background in publishing that deserves extra dollars towards it? There's lots of things to think about. So that's just my nuanced take of the library is amazing, but, I don't think I always will be going that route depending on what the book is and that kind of thing. Let's talk about decorations. Now, I'm sure, as many of you probably know if you've watched my videos, I'm not really into decorations overall. I used to have a much more hot take approach. I used to really just not understand them, but I think given more time, I do understand them more. And I think my issue with decorations before was all of the waste and consumerism. You've got it's not fast fashion, but basically your fast, quickly produced, low quality production of decor that's sold for, very cheap prices and probably made unethically by different companies overseas. I think I was seeing that and understanding that and really thinking, yeah, I don't want any part of that in my home. It's not worth the aesthetic to me if it's just, not something that's, created ethically. But I think over time I've had a more nuanced approach, and I more so understand certain elements of decor that I didn't before. Kind of building off the library topic, I think being able to support artists financially is also really amazing. And so, for instance, something that I love to do when we travel is check out fair trade shops. And it is very likely if I go into a fair trade shop, I might get some, something new that can be displayed around the home. And it is artisan made, supporting people, in oftentimes supporting women, and made, again, ethically fair trade wages. And to me, that means so much more. Knowing that whoever made your item received a living wage or fair wages. I wish that was standardized, but that is something that's been more beneficial to me, as well as I think as we have done a lot of travel over the years, compared to, Sarah back then talking about these things, back in 2017, 2018, 2019, etc. I think now I understand more the desire to showcase, some of your favorite parts of life. And I think for me, I've noticed as I've tried a few little decorative items here and there, either things fade into the background and I totally forget they're there, but then there are also things that I notice every single time I walk into that room and I get excited about them. So I think for me, understanding, okay, what types of items just fade into the background that I don't even notice? Because that would be a waste of time and space. But what things genuinely excite me, even if I've already had them out for a year? I'm trying to shift my decorations more so to that. And so I think now I more so understand why people like decorations. And I think for me, it's always important to be very intentional about it and to choose wisely. But I'd also, same thing like we've talked about with many other types of minimalism and numbers of items, I'd rather have fewer really high quality, excellent pieces of decor that mean a lot to me than having the room filled with all these other things that just, add noise and there's nothing really much more besides that. So that's just my own personal perspective. And I'm sure as I show more videos getting our new home set up, that will probably become apparent as well as we go through. So I'm curious how that will evolve as we go. This next one gets into clothing. And I think with clothing, something I've talked a lot about on the channel is the idea that I would rather have fewer higher quality pieces of clothing, staples that are evergreen, you can wear them whenever, and mix and match things, and not having that giant wardrobe full of stuff that you don't really know what you can wear, you feel stumped about what goes together, and it's just too much. And again, I definitely still in theory support that. I will say in the time since, I have gotten burned by a few higher quality pieces of clothing that I bought that was more intended to last longer. I'm not going to be, shaming any brands specifically here, but I think what I have come to realize is that there can be hit or miss products, especially hit or miss pieces of clothing from a variety of retailers, whether the price point is much higher end or whether it's, much more affordable or even, just bought secondhand. And I think for me, what I'm coming to understand is that I really should just be buying most of my clothing secondhand. Because I think for me, I love the peace of mind of knowing that it's very affordable and you're not adding anything to the landfill directly. You're not supporting any unethical companies directly because, again, they're not the ones receiving the money at this point. Someone else donated it and now you're purchasing it. And there's less risk involved in case it doesn't work. Of course, there are still cases where maybe I can't find what I need at a secondhand shop, or maybe where I do decide to splurge on something and it ends up being awesome. But I also think it's just important to acknowledge that there's no miracle products out there, and sometimes maybe I had thought a certain purchase would have been, the right choice, but it ended up not being that way. And just acknowledging that, moving on from that. And that's the beauty with secondhand shopping, is you can get a wide variety of goods at a cheaper price. And so it's not as much of a sunk cost if it doesn't work out, because maybe you only paid $5 for an item instead of $70. So that's something that I'm internalizing more, and just, coming to terms with that not every splurge of a purchase will last and will work out. And it's unfortunate when that happens, but, it happens nonetheless. In a lot of my videos, I also have talked about how I think decluttering ideally is something to do as soon as possible, as early as possible in your life. And I think the main reason for that is because the sooner you declutter, the sooner you're living a minimal, intentional life. I think there's more life that can be extra awesome. You've got less clutter you're dealing with, you've got more freedom. You may be able to better align your finances to your lifestyle and not live in this constant cycle of overconsumption. So there's so many benefits to doing it early. However, I will say, and I've talked about this in some more recent videos, the past year, seeing my parents struggle so much with working on stuff that their parents had and dealing with some of that, or just discussions of that, I feel for them so much, because it's been a very challenging year and a huge headache. I think it's important to declutter at any stage of life, but I really wish my parents didn't have to go through all that stress. And so if you are, getting older, I think there can be added pressure. I know personally, I would just hate to put so much burden on people who I love and care about, like, future children and whatnot. And so I think, while it's important at every stage, I think at that stage is so important, because it's not about you anymore. It's about the legacy you leave behind. Chances are you've already been decluttering if you've been watching my content. But if you haven't considered it yet, it could be very beneficial to you, and then also, to loved ones at whatever point time comes in the future. And the last thing I think I got wrong, or maybe just emphasized a little bit differently, I think I have maybe emphasized a little bit too much on the decluttering, as opposed to just a minimalist lifestyle overall. Decluttering, I do feel like, is chapter 1 of your minimalist journey. You've got to get the clutter out before you can start making the rest of your life more intentional. But really, I think the sweet spot comes from all of the other stuff besides decluttering. It comes from getting a better routine together. It comes from creating systems that are going to keep you organized and living the life that you want. It comes from prioritization of how you spend your time. Are you spending your time with the right people, doing what you love? Are you living in the present and creating beautiful moments now, rather than looking back with regret because you missed out on these different opportunities? To me, yes, decluttering was essential, and I had to do it, and I still will continue to make decluttering videos. It honestly seems to be what the YouTube algorithm likes for my channel anyway, and not so much my other stuff, if it's not talking about minimalism or decluttering. But I think that's truly the first step. There's so much more beyond that. And I think, to me, it's all been about life optimization. That's what I'm going for. I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing what I want to do in life, spending time with the people I care about, and doing something to me that, can make an impact. And, letting go of the clutter is important, but there's so much beauty that comes from what you do after the clutter is gone, and how you rebuild in terms of meaning and purpose afterwards, that I think is way more important than the clutter and letting it go. I don't want it to demotivate you if you've just started decluttering. It is an essential step, but I think there's so much more that comes beyond that is really where you can make transformative difference in your life. So that would be, I guess, my final point here. Again, I know there were some hot takes today, but definitely it feels good to unpack more of these nuanced layers with some of the previous tips that I did in, a younger, simpler time, now that I've had more chances to reflect and to continue to understand, these different approaches and whatnot. If you like this video and want to check out some other ones, you can do so here or subscribe to the channel up there. I'll see you next time. Bye.